Welcome to the Video Insiders podcast. I'm Carlos Pacheco.
And I'm Tom Martin.
And we're two really, really old people.
Yeah, we're just collecting our pension and working on YouTube.
Yeah, and we're the geriatric team behind YouTube channels, and we've been managing YouTube channels for longer than many of you have been on YouTube. We've been doing it for a bunch of TV networks, media companies, producers, creators. So we have quite a few views under our belt and have managed hundreds, if not thousands, of channels between us at this point. Tom, how is it going?
Yeah, no, pretty positive despite some world craziness. YouTube work seems to tick along, keeping busy, having a bit more time to watch a bit more YouTube than I normally would. So every cloud has a silver lining, but working on some with some cool new clients, pitching for some cool new projects. It's all very very busy at the moment. And yourself?
Yeah, it's busy. There's there's a little bit of lingering clients that have sort of fallen off the radar for the time being, but I think they're just trying to get themselves reorganized. But it's been interesting to see. For me, it's actually I've consumed less YouTube in the last little while, just because there's just a lot of news out there and I kind of want to tune out for a bit. And it's been more catching up on series on the old Amazon Prime or Netflix or whatever. And I think the other night, my wife wanted to watch for some reason, she wanted to watch Contagion. I was like, really?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, it depressed the shit out of me, pardon my French. So anyways, not to get back onto that subject, but anyways, we just that's been my world for the past little while.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because as we record today, there was a article that went out saying that YouTube and Netflix had reduced their kind of defaults on quality and stuff. I'm not surprised. I'm currently watching Ozark. I'm a bit late to the party, but absolutely such a good show. And I'm getting drip fed Better Call Saul over here on Netflix. So enjoying that. It's one of the few shows that you have to wait for every week, which I think is kind of like retro now. Pretty nice. It's a pretty nice experience.
Yeah, I'm going through the same issues with currently watching Star Trek Picard, getting it every week, and it's sort of like it's annoying and at the same time refreshing.
Yeah, it seems such a quaint experience now, which just shows just how far we've come in our view experiences in such a short space of time. It's pretty crazy.
So obviously I'm going to apologize because me and the wife are both working at home and she's going into calls and we're in a very small space. So we're hearing her in the background right now.
And she's the big boss of the household. We all know that.
Exactly. Let's just hope she doesn't talk about anything super secret, things. So while we're recording right now, so I'm just hoping that stuff. Anyways, we won't drag things on too much. I wanted to send out a big thank you to TubeBuddy for sponsoring the show. TubeBuddy is the ultimate tool for creators to streamline their daily workflow on YouTube, allowing for more time to make great content. For brands to help reduce busy work and focus on what matters, growing your business on YouTube. For agencies to help manage multiple client channels, and for networks to give partners the tools for success and an attractive incentive for recruitment. Tom, do we have a special offer for our audience?
We do indeed. You can get a exclusive Video Insiders discount on a multiple channel license, which is super valuable, by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy. Thank you, TubeBuddy.
Thank you, TubeBuddy. Tom, who's on the show this week?
Yeah, this is actually our first attempt at a three-handed interview show. So this is really interesting. And from memory, actually, we gave this very, very highly decorated person a super intro in person. So I actually don't think we need to hang around too much now, especially as your wife's about to reveal all of her corporate secrets. I think we should cut straight to the interview and then we'll be back on the other side to wrap up the conversation.
But I've actually learned to mute the mic while you're talking, so we don't hear things in the background. Yes, we won't lollygag too long, but I like how you described our three. I would have called it something else. Our 3-team recording. So obviously, let's get to it with James Creech.
So on a lot of podcasts or interview shows, you'll say, oh, this person needs no introduction. And in this case, I actually think it's true, because if you're listening to this podcast, you have something to do with the YouTube industry or the industry side of YouTube. And if you're in the industry side of YouTube, you know James Creech, because in my book, James Creech is Mr. YouTube industry. I think of any conference, James is there. Everyone knows James. James knows everyone. Everyone loves James. One of the friendliest, loveliest guys in the industry. Super knowledgeable. Host of the All Things Video podcast, which I've been listening to since maybe the start, and if not the start, close by. But just in case you've been living under a rock, James, please say hello to our lovely audience of fellow industry insiders and tell us a little bit about your journey and your career and how you got to where you are now with Paladin Software.
Well, first of all, thank you, Tom. That's the best and kindest introduction I've ever received. I think I'm just let's just wrap up the interview right here.
He's fishing for a free license. I think
it sounds like it. Yeah, exactly.
It's all down here from here, James. This is where, if you've ever seen like Frost Nixon, this is where it kicks in now.
That's right. But yeah, again, thank you for the introduction. I've been an admirer of your guys' show for a long time, so it's a dream to get to chat with you both. As way of background, I started my career in ad tech, working for a digital media startup here in LA called Channel Factory. And we were doing video advertising on YouTube really before that was a concept, right? Before TrueView existed, trying to make videos go viral and promote content on YouTube. After 2.5 years at Channel Factory, building it from 5 people in the founder's apartment to, 8-figure revenue business, opening offices in New York and Chicago. I moved on and went and worked at an influencer network, or an MCN, called Bent Pixels, which was started out of Vegas, but wanted to expand into Los Angeles. I helped open that office, work with talent, work with advertisers, help grow the careers of these digital influencers. And at the time, we were building a lot of tools internally, really out of necessity, right, to make our jobs easier, because we were managing so many talent and growing quickly. And I, kind of looked around, and all of our competitors were doing the same thing. And so I started asking my friends in the industry, well, how are you tackling this problem, or how do you solve for that? And they said, similar idea, either we do it very manually, or, we're building some internal solution. And that's when it hit me. This is the real opportunity. This is something I'm passionate about, and is a much bigger play. And so I teamed up with 2 partners, our co-founder and COO, Thomas Kramer, and then our CTO, Ulla Morton. And we launched Paladin about 4 years ago at this point. And we build influencer marketing software for agencies and media companies all over the world. We have customers now in over 35 countries across 6 continents. So it's been a fun journey and fun growth story over the past few years.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been sort of like a big fan of your work over the years, and sort of been following both from your Bent Pixels days to your Paladin days. For us, working as channel managers and all that stuff, we sort of understand, me and Tom sort of know what Paladin is, but tell us what Paladin is and how it's different from the competition.
Sure. So Paladin is the leading influencer marketing suite for agencies and media companies, right? So we streamline everything from influencer discovery and talent management to royalty accounting, payments, and campaign reporting across YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch. More platforms coming soon, but those are the kind of core 5 that we focus on today. And, over the last, call it 18 to 24 months, influencer marketing has certainly gotten a lot more competitive, and there are a number of good solutions out there, but it's it's a bit of a crowded space, so it is helpful to understand how we differentiate. And there's really kind of 5 key ways that I've identified how we're different. The first is business model, right? Everything that we do is software as a service. So you pay a license fee, you get access to our suite of products. We're not a marketplace, right? We're not doing matchmaking between brands and influencers. We're not an agency, so there are some very good service companies out there that run campaigns or maybe have built some tools, but also will help you run an influencer activation soup to nuts. That's not our business and never will be. The other aspect is data privacy. So we offer all of our customers a dedicated private environment for their data, not just creating a shared database and dumping everyone in there. Especially when you're working with agencies, having that private white labeled environment is really essential for them to protect this big asset that they've worked so hard to build up over the years, these relationships and this trusted database of influencers. So data privacy is number two. The third is our value chain focus, right? We are very much focused on the supply side of the ecosystem, meaning companies that work directly with talent. So it's influencer agencies, it's influencer networks or MCNs, talent management companies. There are certainly good competitors out there that are catering to the demand side, working with brands and media agencies. But that's not our business. One, because we don't want there to be a conflict of interest with our customers. And two, just because the use cases are different, right? What a brand needs out of an influencer marketing suite is very different than what an agency needs in order to manage its creators and present that data to brands. Fourth is platform support. So, we started off being a multi-platform solution and not just thinking about, say, Instagram or not just focusing on YouTube, but really offering a comprehensive solution across YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. And then perspective. The last piece is that we've always viewed influencer marketing, digital media as a global phenomenon. And we've built a global vision and footprint, not just focusing on, the US, the domestic market, but we have, quite a bit of customers in Europe. We have quite a bit of customers in Southeast Asia and the Middle East and a lot of these other emerging markets in Latin America. And so having that global vision and perspective has been essential to how we stand out from the competition.
I'd like to go on to talk about the wider video industry in a minute, but in terms of the kind of this is quite a broad question, but it'd be good to get even just like kind of a soundbite from you. And what is the kind of current state of the kind of general influencer marketing space? Is it one in like burgeoning growth? Is it kind of matured now? Is it kind of stable? Are the glory days gone? What are your kind of rough ideas around that?
Yeah, well, it's massive, right? And it's still seeing explosive growth. And I think those of us who are so close to it, right, working in the day-to-day, we remember the early days when no one knew what should an influencer charge for a post, or how do you run a campaign and handle reporting. We certainly evolved significantly since then. So it is maturing. I wouldn't say it's mature yet, because you think of some of these, traditional formats, right? Television is almost 100 years old. You think about, radio and some of these analog formats. What we have in digital is still so new and so burgeoning that it's growing really rapidly. And there's still a long time horizon on the growth trajectory of these new businesses and these new models. And then you think about influencer relative to some other digital trends, right? Like social media at large, or mobile advertising, mobile display advertising. It's certainly gone from, you work with a media buyer and there isn't really a clear idea of who owns this or where the budgets come from for influencer, to now there are established influencer programs at brands, right? They're looking at longer term ambassador models. There are clear allocated spends for influencer marketing, and it's being demonstrated that it works, right? Not only is it a good way to reach an audience, but it's a great way to engage them. There's a lot higher ROI in response from influencer marketing than some legacy forms of media.
Yeah, it makes real sense to me, because I'm working more and more with quote unquote brands and less kind of just creators. And often when I look at what their end goal is to sell their services or products and how far they are away from where they need to be to kind of grow an organic following, often my advice to them is, they come to me they want help to grow their existing YouTube channel or to launch a YouTube channel. Often when I look at what they're doing in the cold light of day, often my answer is, well, either do just paid ads or use that budget and give it to influencers in your space who have already got the audience, already got the influence, already got the trust, and you're going to see a much better return on that investment and much faster than taken 5 years to grow a half-assed YouTube channel. So yeah, I can definitely see the value of influencer marketing, but I still think there's a little bit of maybe a bit of a stigma around it, around, tracking ROI and, being able to track the success of a campaign or not. But I'm assuming tools like yours and a lot of the partners that you work with probably have solved that problem or are getting close to solving that.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? Most of the time when we come in and talk to a new customer, they are, doing a very manual approach to reporting, where it's screenshots, it's building a deck and putting together examples of the posts and some of the key metrics around performance. But what brands and their agency partners are looking for as we progress is a greater depth of data and true analysis of the content performance, so we can measure results, right? And that comes from truly understanding the audience, right? Real-time data about audience demographics, so the age and gender splits, the location of where these viewers are coming from, understanding in not just impressions and reach and viewership at the top of the funnel, but, really more engagement-driven metrics, the click-through activity, in some cases purchase, right, or intent to buy a product after engaging with an influencer post. So we're trying to provide a more comprehensive, real-time, holistic reporting solution.
One of the points that I think you mentioned, and I think you sort of you touched it a little bit, and it reminds me of it doesn't remind me, actually, it goes back to a chat I just had with, do you know Brendan Gaughan?
Yeah, of course.
Mechanism,
Brendan's
right?
an old friend.
Yeah, exactly. So I just talked to him this week, and FYI, if the episodes might be one before the other, I don't know, but we just had the same conversation where, the evolution of influencer marketing, is where brands are starting to learn to build relationships as opposed to just coming in and, asking for a campaign and disappearing. And I think you sort of mentioned something in that vein where you guys are sort of trying to find a way to, or building that dashboard that lets the brand have a continuous relationship with the creator.
Yeah. Ultimately, every brand's objectives are different, but I think we're seeing more success from a true partnership model rather than, the transactional approach that may have been popular a few years ago, right? When we saw all these marketplaces popping up, and this isn't a knock against marketplaces, they just fundamentally serve a different need. Many of them were focused on, well, how do you activate micro-influencers at scale? And maybe that helps you snag makes a lot of noise, right? You can snag these vanity metrics of great viewership and engagement, and you've reached a lot of eyeballs. But if you are really trying to move the needle, then I think we've seen time and time again that these larger activations with true influencers, right, that wield influence among their audience, there's no replacement for that.
So going a kind of a step broader than influencer marketing, as I said at the start, you're kind of, to me, Mr. Industry. Your podcast, you spoke to so many people from so many different parts of the industry. You attend all of the events. You've obviously got your finger on the pulse. I'd be really interested to see an outsider's perspective, or at least an outside from me and Carlos, is what have you really seen change in the last month across the video industry in general, and what do you think is kind of coming in the next 6 to 12 months that is really going to be the big shift?
Yeah. Well, I feel fortunate to have the chance to work with companies all over the world and have some insight into this. And I started the podcast, All Things Video, really as a passion project because I was having a chance to meet all these great entrepreneurs and innovators in the digital media space, and just kind of selfishly curious to learn about their success and the lessons learned along the way, and then also wanting to give back and share those stories with a bigger audience. So it's been such a fun initiative and a great way to learn so quickly about many different aspects of digital media. But in terms of the shifts that we've seen, say over the last 12 months, I don't think I'm going to surprise anyone here, but obviously Instagram has become the predominant platform for influencer marketing. One, just because of the ease of creation and the natural tie-ins to things like commerce, and also the fact that it's maintained this level of the cool factor, right, among youth, but also doing a good job of letting brands engage and publishers and media companies play in the ecosystem. It's just built a really successful foundation for influencer marketing to occur. I think the other thing that we're witnessing is more influencers creating products and driving commerce. And the traditional examples of this way back when would have been something like Michelle Phan and Ipsy, right? These creator-driven businesses. But now we're seeing even more examples of that, and not just merchandise solutions where every influencer has a store and a T-shirt, but actually seeing influencers build businesses and creating their own product lines. Jeffree Star Cosmetics, and some of the things that obviously like Kylie has done are just other great examples of the power of the influencer marketing in this space. And I think we're going to continue to witness more influencer-driven projects and companies. And then the last thing is a bit, outside the influencer space specifically, but we're seeing an enormous rise in digital publishers. And so the internet has removed barriers and created more ways to produce, distribute, and monetize content. And the first iteration of that was, web-based, almost blog-style publishers that, you think of like a Refinery 29 or kind of what Condé Nast and Hearst have done to lean in from a traditional print publication into, shifting that online. And then there was this kind of 2.0 model where it's like, okay, well, now we can do video, we can do rich media. And then with the growth of social, now we've seen companies built entirely on the backs of that said, well, we're not going to leverage influencers. We're going to be that influential voice. We're going to build a publisher strategy around an audience on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok even. And so, whether it's Donut Media, Toonstar, Cheddar, the Young Turks, right? All of these businesses being built through social media. The rise of digital publishers over the last 12 to 24 months has been pretty astounding.
Yeah, it's been definitely a trend of publishers sort of adopting a little bit of the influencer ecosystem or even influencer tactics to grow audiences. You touched on a point of Instagram becoming very popular. Do you consider that still the one to watch? And is there, out of all the platforms we're talking about these days, today is like everybody's freaking out over Twitter announcing its version of stories. Like, which one's the one to watch? Which one's on the way out? Like, any insights on that you can give to our audience?
Sure. From a B2C standpoint, Instagram, I continue to foresee it being dominant. If you're an influencer, you have to be on Instagram today. That's just a great platform for discovery. It's a great way to do branded content. So keep an eye on it, certainly. But in terms of where the growth is coming from, again, no surprise, it's TikTok. And I was in a bit of a wait and see mode. I've even been an early TikTok naysayer just because, Musical.ly had stagnated when ByteDance ended up acquiring it and then merging it with TikTok, a very similar, user experience in terms of a mobile app. I was hesitant initially because, there's so much ad spend behind it that was propping up the activity that was really hard to know, what's organic interest from influencers versus what is promoted content that's driving activity on the app. Now I think it's pretty clear that TikTok is here to stay. It's a great new platform for influencers to feel like they have control over the content. They're having fun on the platform, which is cool to see. It's also, allowing new influencers to build an audience and get discovered. And then you see them, migrating over and also building audience on YouTube and Instagram. So definitely keep an eye on TikTok. From a B2B standpoint, the number one to watch is LinkedIn. I think Pinterest is also pretty interesting in terms of what it's doing with video content. So I'd keep an eye on those. The one that I think I've been a little bit more bearish on is probably Twitter. And Twitter still, has a place in the world and serves a purpose if you're in live sports and journalism and, politics and a few other kind of sectors. But most Americans and certainly the rest of the world, Twitter is not their go-to destination for content or their social media platform of choice. I think Donald Trump has been probably the single greatest lifesaver of Twitter in the past 4 years, and we'll see if it can continue to go the distance. I don't think anyone needs stories on Twitter, much like I don't think we needed them on Skype or many of the other platforms that have followed suit and just kind of copying that feature set because it's clearly working. But it's a way for Twitter to kind of try to stay relevant and remain in the cultural conversation.
Yeah, we do have LinkedIn stories now. So,
And a related question to that, James, is what about direct monetization on some of those platforms? So you've spoken about like how influencers can use commerce and how they can do brand deals and stuff like that. But for many, I'd say at least 2 years now, we've always been just a few months away from like some kind of creator program on Instagram where you can directly monetize video and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think TikTok's probably not too far away. I think Byte have recently announced that they've got a few $100,000 to give away to their first few hundred like featured creators, something like that. Have you heard anything on the grapevine that you may not be able to share with us?
I'd say don't hold your breath, right? People are always optimistically hoping for that. And YouTube is really the only reliable platform today where you have a chance to do essentially passive monetization, have an ad program built in that as long as you meet the criteria, you can take advantage of. The second closest behind that is Facebook. And we've been waiting for years, right, for Facebook monetization to kick in. And it's really only for top creators and publishers. We're seeing more creators kind of being onboarded into the program now. Instagram is probably the likely next successor to that just because of the built-in advertising reach and scale that Facebook can bring to bear in Instagram. TikTok, I would be much more skeptical that it's coming in a meaningful way for the majority of creators anytime soon. I could certainly see a program similar to YouTube Preferred, where top talent on the TikTok platform are going to get deals and can take advantage of it. But if you're an average TikTok creator, don't expect to see monetization headed your way anytime in the near future. So that's probably my predictions. Aside from traditional advertising revenue, there are some other approaches like commerce or like direct to fan monetization. Of course, every creator can start up a Patreon account. But I think what Twitch has done, they certainly have ads in the platform, but most streamers are making their money direct from their audience, and it skews to be a bit of an older audience, a bit more disposable income. But Twitch has done a really compelling job of building a direct monetization link between a broadcaster and their audience in a really powerful way. And I would be curious to see if other platforms will follow suit and look at alternatives to monetization that aren't solely ad dependent.
Yeah, speaking of making money from creators, I've always been super fascinated by the world of MCNs. And when I think of MCNs, if I ever had a question about an MCN, you'd be the person I'd go to, James, because you've spoken to so many people. You've interviewed people on the podcast from Fullscreen, Xmaker, you name it. You've spoken to them. You've had the tech experience from Bent Pixels and Paladin. There are some MCNs that are still holding on. What is the state of the MCN world from the inside? Like, are they still existing? Are they healthy? Are they all pivoting to become talent agencies? What are you seeing around that world? And like, do you predict that even the kind of last few strongholds will still be there in, say, 12 months' time?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I'll give you a bit of probably an abbreviated answer. There's probably a lengthy conversation we could have about this at some point. And I've actually written quite a lengthy kind of history of MCNs and the evolution that I think they've gone through. I've yet to publish it, but maybe one of these days I'll put it up on LinkedIn or something. But, the original impetus for the multi-channel network, the MCN model, grew out of YouTube. It grew out of the fact that in the early days, YouTube was growing so quickly and didn't have a way to provide customer service and direct monetization for all partners. And so they, granted permission to these multi-channel networks to administer that on their behalf, right? And so you had these companies pop up that started to sign talent, in the thousands and in the tens of thousands, and they were scaling quickly. Essentially a bit of a kind of an ad network model in the 1.0 days. And after that land grab phase, shifted to, okay, are there other models where we can work with at least the top talent to help them build a long-term business, right? Do 360 talent management, think about merchandise, think about content licensing deals, think about, migrating to other platforms, whether that's in digital or maybe it's, also kind of bridging the gap and moving more into traditional, launching a TV series, things like that. Over time, YouTube has changed its policies and changed the way that it interacts with MCNs. And part of that is, being much more restrictive in the number of new content owners that they grant and the number of YouTube certified companies or MCNs that they allow to exist. So they've certainly become, it's much more difficult to get approved for that than it was in the past. The other aspect is I think they witnessed a lot of MCNs, particularly the large-scaled American ones, gaining too much power, right? In the days of Maker and Fullscreen and Machinima, you had this idea that MCNs would push back pretty aggressively when YouTube made changes. And I think there was a sentiment within YouTube that wanted that to change. And meanwhile, all the other social platforms, Facebook and Twitter, had a chance to observe what was happening in the MCN ecosystem. And most of them have elected not to go down a similar path and offer a program like what YouTube has done. And so the MCNs have changed their business over time, shifted more towards premium ad sales, shifted to providing services to talent, typically in the way of audience growth and digital rights management, brand deals and sponsorships. And so if you think about what does the model look like today, most of what we think of the traditional MCNs have evolved into either talent management groups, right, where they are providing these services to influencers, and often there's an agency component where they're out running influencer marketing campaigns on the talent's behalf. And then the other half are kind of studios or publishers creating next generation content for digital platforms. That kind of feels like what most of those businesses have become.
Yep, that's feels like a lot of conversations we've had in the past in terms of how we see this space has evolved over the last 2 to 3 years. Now, let's talk about what you're doing. Tell us about Measure Studios. What is it?
Yeah, so we've built an entirely new product. We spent a lot of time over the past 12 months really, understanding what other changes are happening in the digital media ecosystem, spending a lot of time with other types of companies. So in addition to our core customer segment of influencer agencies, talent networks, talent management companies, we wanted to understand, what is this trend with digital publishers? What are traditional broadcasters and studios doing on social? And that led us to asking a lot of questions and tinkering with this idea of, there need to be better analytics and business intelligence solutions for these types of companies, right? We got a lot of encouragement as well from our platform partners, specifically YouTube and Facebook, saying, there aren't really good tools out there for these segments today. And what started as an experiment and these conversations kind of developed into an MVP and developed into okay, there's a real product opportunity. And so we recently launched Measure Studio, which is an analytics tool that covers YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram today. And we're rolling out Snapchat and Twitter support in Q2 of this year. And the whole impetus behind it was, if you're a small publisher, you're probably pretty reliant on native platform analytics, which does a pretty good job on YouTube. You can get pretty far, but is admittedly weaker on Facebook and also Instagram in particular. And so we wanted to address some of those challenges. We wanted to bring everything into a single interface where you have multi-platform data analysis capabilities, where you can, benchmark content and understand what's working well, what's resonating with my audience, and let's do more of that content, versus what's maybe not performing so well. How do we improve it? Maybe we kill this series because it's clearly not working. Let's focus our energies over here. So there's a big emphasis on just understanding the content performance. The other pieces that I think are kind of unique and cool about what we're doing hourly data tracking for all posts for the first 72 hours, which is really that critical period when you first upload something to make sure it performs, right? Is it ranking in search? Is it helping us boost organic discovery of this content? And we had heard from Group 9 and others that they had people manually tracking that in spreadsheets, right? Going into backend analytics every hour and manually pulling that down so they could analyze the results and try and understand the algorithms. So we're doing that. We have full access to the Instagram Graph API, so we're storing Instagram stories forever. Even after they expire from the account, we'll save the content and allow you to play it back. We also track all of the metrics around Instagram stories, from impressions and reach to all the types of engagements, so taps, forward and back, and all the likes and other activity around a story. And then we allow you to group content, slice and dice it, and better analyze things in a comparative way. And the example I like to give is, if you post a piece of content on a platform like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you can see how it performs on a fixed time horizon. But if you post two pieces of content on different dates, there's no true way to get a good apples to apples comparison, right? If you post something on the 1st and then you post another piece of content on the 4th of the month, then the only way you can look at that on an analytics scale is, how do we do from, say, the 1st to the 7th? There's no easy way in native platform analytics to say, how did each of our pieces of content do in, say, the first week or do in the first 30 days? And with Measure Studio, you can now answer those questions and say, what is getting the most engagement across all of our content? What's making us the most money? What's getting the most viewership? And how do we continue to make great content like this that's going to drive, more views, more audience, and more revenue for us as a business?
Yeah, one really interesting thing that one of our recent guests said, that the problem with analytics is that they're only as useful as the person that's kind of reading them, and you have to be able to. I think his quote was, "You have to know how to read the tea leaves," which I thought was really cool. Does Measure Studio currently or in the future have plans to actually pull out insights and give actionable advice, rather than just saying, here is a tool from which you can draw your own inferences? Will it actually say to someone like, do more of this X, Y, and Z because of this kind of thing?
Absolutely. That's where we're going, right? With great improvements in technology like machine learning, we can push proactive recommendations to users based on what we observe in the data. So that's all what we're building towards in the product today. Data nerds and people who are deep in the weeds of these platform analytics are really going to find a lot of value in it because they know how to interpret the signals. But even if you are a lay user who maybe isn't as educated about data, we wanted to make the tool very accessible. So there are visual indicators of performance, right? If a post is doing above average, we outline it in green. If something's below average, it's outlined in red. You can drill down into that, and every metric has a visual indicator to say, hey, impressions are 1.6 times higher than average for this post type. And then you can drill in and see, okay, what might be driving that? So you still need to draw your own inferences from the creative itself, or maybe it was something about the thumbnail or the metadata that helped this perform very well. But it at least lets you start asking the right questions and tweaking your content production or your programming strategy based on what the data suggests.
I've just had a really good idea for a feature, so I'm going to say it here publicly, just in case you release it in the future. I can take full credit for it. Or it might already exist. But I was having a conversation with a client today, and they were basically saying, like, at what period of time do you know whether you've got a hit or not? And I said, well, once you've run the channel for long enough and you've got a groove, you'll know pretty much within the first few hours whether you've got a hit or whether it's average or whether it's a flop, or, you'll know what your kind of benchmarks are. But what about a feature whereby after, say, a few hours, even if you're tracking hourly, you could have like an email alert or a push notification that said, hey, Tom, your video that you published 3 hours ago sucks because it's getting 30% less views than normal. You might want to go and try and change the title or the thumbnail, something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And there can be situational factors about, maybe you just release this at the wrong time of day, or, maybe the thumbnail just didn't catch people's attention, and, you don't want the content to be penalized as a result. And I think we've even seen from what a lot of folks have done research into the algorithms and theorized that not just does a post impact that single post performance, but it can have a bleed over effect into subsequent content that you're just not going to get, you're not going to appear in recommended content or in discovery features as frequently if your past content doesn't perform well. So it is critical to really understand how that works and to dial it in appropriately. And you're right, maybe you kill content early on that's not working and you re-upload it and you try a different tactic. We certainly want to be able to encourage people to do that and measure the results with a tool like Measure Studio.
Cool. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have an early demo from you, James, and also a brand new demo just a couple of weeks ago at VidCon London. That was really cool to see. It's such a beautiful tool, and what I think is amazing about it, and this is James has not paid me to say this, although I will. I do accept. I do accept bribes. It's a really affordable solution. You know, there are a lot of dashboards and tools that are kind of enterprise level only, or only enterprises could afford them. But I think this is accessible to the prosumer, the kind of serious hobbyist even, and I really think it's going to help a lot of creators to be a bit more analytical without having to, be a nerd like me and Carlos and enjoy exporting things to CSVs and getting extra nerdy. So yeah, I can't speak highly of it enough. So yeah, kudos to you, James, and the team.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And that was a big goal, was to make something accessible for individual creators where they can come in and get powerful analytics and make decisions on it. Right? We've been testing it with a few creators, one of which was a musician, and he said, I didn't realize that my behind the scenes and backstage performance content did so well. I'm certainly going to start doing more of it because that's clearly what my fans want. And he also ended up sharing with us that he posts a lot of Instagram stories, as many people do, and he said, I didn't realize that after I post 10 stories in a sequence, people just start tuning out, right? They drop off significantly. And so it was helpful to have real data to point to from Measure Studio to say, now I know if I'm doing a concert or I'm doing like a snap, a series of stories on my Instagram, I'm going to limit it to about 10 posts because that's what holds people's attention. So we can answer those questions for an individual creator, but we've also built this scalable, flexible pricing model that also works for small to medium businesses all the way up to the biggest publishers in the world, like Group 9, who are using it to understand, how is Jash content doing? How is Pop Sugar content and, all their other brands? How are we performing and how do we move the needle to continue to grow our audience on these platforms?
And so, you've got your kind of core product, you've got Measure Studio, which is like your baby. I know that people like you, James, you're never going to kind of be comfortable just releasing some great stuff. There's always going to be you must have a shoebox full of ideas somewhere, like me and Carlos do, that you don't have time to get around to. Do you think there's another product coming from Paladin or in the pipeline in the next few years?
Yeah, we're constantly experimenting. That's one of the things that our engineering team loves to do is, brainstorm new products, and sometimes we'll build like an MVP, and, some things work out and, we really believe in them and the market validates that there's a need. And, we've built tools in the past that just, weren't quite as successful as we thought they could be. And that's why you stress test an idea. And so we've certainly deprecated products or cut short some of the research and development initiatives that we do, but constantly tinkering, constantly looking for feedback and asking people, what are you struggling with today? What are the other tools that you use, or what are the manual processes that you're just sick of doing? And how can we help make your life easier and give you that time back? So always focused on that. For the short term, lots of continued growth for us on the core Paladin suite. We're making a lot of improvements, including adding TikTok support, which is coming very soon. People have been dying to have that included in the tool, so that's in the works. We've also released a lot of improvements to our campaign management and reporting tools, including content approval workflows, just making it easier to review a post for an influencer before it goes live. And then lots of activity on the Measure Studio front. So I mentioned Snapchat and Twitter support coming next quarter. And we're constantly adding new features and considering ideas based on what our customers suggest.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, considering that literally every social platform has essentially pivoted to video, I think having the tools that you're providing is becoming more and more essential for marketers and brands and anybody who does a business online as a publisher, right? So it's really interesting to see how the space has evolved. Back to the whole thing with with Twitter creating stories, right? It's like, okay, now we need to track those videos, those views, and how does that work compared to everything else? And I keep making a joke online about everything turning to stories at this point. So obviously there's going to be some correlations to compare.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I encourage people to find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there, so you can connect with me. I share some updates. I post a lot about my podcast, so that's another good way to get in touch. Is check out All Things Video, and let me know if you have any suggestions for guests or questions and things you want to cover on the show. Other than that, if you want to learn more about Paladin, you can visit our website, paladinsoftware.com, or find us anywhere on social. And Measure Studio is measure.studio for the web address. And again, Measure Studio everywhere on social media.
Awesome. Yeah. I was about to say you're almost at 150 podcast episodes, which is a crazy number for us.
Yeah, it's adding up. I've been at it for a little over 4 years now and still love it. Published a new episode last night, constantly, working on new interviews, and it keeps me learning. It keeps it fun and engaging for me. So love doing it.
I'm going to ask you one more question, James, because you're obviously the OG of the industry. Who is one smart person in industry? I know you know all of them, but who is an amazing person that our audience would really benefit from hearing? So who should we get on as a future guest?
Oh, who should you guys have on the podcast? That's a great question. Well, the first name that popped in my head is Thomas Kramer, my co-founder. He's a brilliant guy who we worked together back in our ad tech days at Channel Factory, and then he ran optimization for Maker Studios pre and post Disney acquisition. So was really in the weeds on the data side there, and that's why building a product like Measure Studio has been pretty close to his heart. But just super knowledgeable and plugged into what's happening in the digital space. He's a deep thinker about it. So that's someone I'd recommend. A lot of other smart friends in the space. Matt Levin over at Donut Media is building a great company and creating the coolest automotive content on the internet. So, talk to him and encourage people to check out their stuff. And then I love what the guys at Licht are doing in the UK. So your backyard, Tom.
They're very, very good friends of mine at Licht.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Paul and Simon and the rest of the gang have built just an incredible solution for commercial music licensing, which has been a huge pain point for creators on social platforms for a long time. You guys are probably going to tell me to shut up, but now I'm thinking of so many. The last one I'd say is Jesse Shimon from Paper Cup, who's building like the world's coolest synthetic voice technology to help auto-localize content. They started with English to Spanish and vice versa, and now they're working on German. So love what they're building. Big fan of Jesse and his team. So that would be a few suggestions for you.
I'm actually speaking to those guys next week. So
hey,
I shall invite them onto the podcast quickly.
I love it.
As also with my friends from Licht, who I can't believe I haven't invited on yet. So thank you, James. They'll have They'll have a lot to live up to after this episode. So thank you very much, James, Mr. Industry Creech. Really appreciate it. You must check out all of this software and definitely make sure you go and give a subscribe to All Things Video podcast. You may even find a really scrappy episode that he did with a couple of reprobates that you may have heard of on this podcast as well. So, go subscribe, leave him a review, and tell him that you heard about him through the Video Insiders podcast.
Amazing. Thank you guys both so much. Tom, Carlos, big fans of both of you and what you're doing. Love the show and can't thank you enough. It's been a privilege to be here.
Thanks, James.
Big thank you to James for stopping by and coming to the show and being our guinea pig in our first three-person
a YouTube industry sandwich.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've had many discussions with James, either with other companies where I was working at other companies, because I can't think of another way to sort of shoot the shit in terms of discussing, what's happening in the industry. And we're all sort of like, we can geek out in this space. And it's been sort of the case with everybody we bring to the show. It's sort of like people that we know we'd have like great conversations with in general, just, over beers, over pints. I love having them on the show.
Yeah, and I think the reason that James has been so successful in his career in the industry is not because he's so super connected and not just because he's so super knowledgeable, but he is genuinely one of the nicest people on the planet. There's no one that could ever, say a bad word against him. And we've had a few pints on both sides of the Atlantic now. So thanks for coming on, James. Really great insights into the world of both influencer marketing, and I'm always happy to get nosy about the glory days or the dirty days of MCNs as well. So really interesting stuff. You can also check out the episode where myself and Carlos appeared on James's awesome podcast, All Things Video. We'll link to that in the show notes. But please do give us a rating and review for this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us a star on Overcast, whatever kind of podcatcher you're using. Give us some kind of street cred, and do share this with a friend who you think would find it useful to hear more about the YouTube and online video industry.
Yeah, I mean, I would also add that Spotify is starting to become a serious podcast player. So obviously, if you're listening to Spotify, subscribe to us on Spotify. That'd be great. A big thank you once again to TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is the premier tool for managing, optimizing your YouTube content. I'm personally a big fan of the keyword suggestion tool. Sometimes I even have a hard time finding keywords, and so I'll just click that tool and it analyzes my content and sees, gives me the best keywords to use. So it's probably the best, one of the most used feature for me on top of the copy paste tool. Tom, we have a special offer for our audience.
Yeah, you can get an exclusive Video Insiders multi-channel discount by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy. Thank you, TubeBuddy, and thank you to all of our Video Insiders. Thanks again to James, and we'll speak to you all in a couple of weeks.
Take care. Keep safe.
Dun, 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 dun.